You are on, sir.
Okay, I would like to call to order the Special Finance Committee budget hearing of July 27th, 2020. Can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Renee Villarreal.
Present.
Councillor Jamie Caswett Sanchez.
Here.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth.
I'm here. Thank you.
Councillor Signe Lindell. Councillor Ramon Tiger Abetha.
Here. Okay, so we have a quorum. Under approval of the agenda, we will begin with the municipal court budget. Then we will move to the city clerk, council and constituent services. And then we will go on to the public works continuation. And if there's time, the utilities continuation. And at 3:30, I would like to give AFSCME an opportunity to address the finance committee. They sent us an email. I reached out to them and asked if they wanted to speak to us today. And they said that they would be willing to speak to us at 3:30. And then we will have a hard stop at 4 p.m. Is there any discussion or questions regarding today's agenda?
Move to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Councillor Ramon Tiger Abetha.
Yes.
Councillor Renee Villarreal.
Yes.
Councillor Jamie Caswett Sanchez.
Yes.
Councillor Carol Romero Worth.
Yes.
Councillor Signe Lindell will join us in a few. It's not on the call. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Then let's go ahead and let's start with the municipal court budget.
Oh, good afternoon.
Judge, you need to unmute your microphone, please.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? I
Yes,
can't
yes.
hear. Okay, there we go.
Yes,
Good
ma'am.
afternoon. This is Judge Virginia Behill, Santa Fe Municipal Court. And thank you for accommodating our schedule for today. I do want to start off by saying that we are going to go before council this coming Wednesday to give you an update, and it'll be mostly a COVID update. We have been doing everything that we've been guided through with the city administration, the mayor's office, and the city manager's office, finance, and worked also closely with human services with regard to getting towards our budget request before you. We don't have a large budget. Actually, the areas that we did cut that I think I'll just highlight real quick is we are no longer doing mediation because mediation was done for animal control cases, and that now is a civil matter. So we no longer have mediation contracts. The largest contract that we had was for the services for IHS, which was a sole source provider for our DUI and drug court. We are no longer doing homeless court at the Interfaith Shelter. That cost was a washout because we just transferred all that was required, staff and laptops, copiers and all when we went there. The other area that actually was cut was, it looks like, we're no longer contributing to teen court. So those three large areas were the major areas of cut. We are not following the guidance of the city. We are no longer filling vacancies. I am having the difficulty of losing seasoned clerks to other places because I am not able to promote them within. But as a result of that, you have the budget before you, and I think really less is more. If you have specific questions, Jackie Baca, who's been working very closely on the numbers, is our deputy finance director, and she can probably answer what I can't. So I stand for questions.
Thank you, Judge. Questions, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Judge Vigil. It's good to see you, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. It would be helpful if your analyst could walk us through specifically what we've been doing on each of these budgets is hearing in particular in the contractual areas and other operating costs. I know you kind of hit some of the highlights, but so if you take the general fund and your budget, contractuals and utilities, what makes up that $20,950? What's in that specific line item that's being cut?
I refer to Jackie.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero, some of the cuts that we made there were, one specifically would be the pro tem judges. We cut that by $10,000. Some of the other areas that we cut were had to do with gas, electricity, which comes through finance to determine what amounts that would be. There were those that were cut by $5,000, which was the water, and then we had small increases to gas and electricity. Other cuts that we saw within that area were benefits, general liability increased, although our travel decreased tremendously because we're not doing any travel. So that makes up pretty much the 20,000.
And how much do you still have left for pro tem judges? You cut 10,000. I assume you didn't cut them out completely because you need them.
That is correct, Counselor. We have 45,000. So
Okay.
prior to that, we had budgeted 55,000.
Great. And then if we just skip down to general fund, other operating costs, what makes up that 246,000?
Again, that includes services from other city entities, which was a large amount, which is a very huge part of that, which came up to 370,000. Then we did have some increases, so it netted out to the 246.
Can you give me an example of one of those?
Of the other increases?
No, of the services from other city.
That amounted a reduction of 370,000.
But what's an example of something that's a service from another city? And
So,
Mr.
yeah,
Chair, Counselor, I can go ahead and fill that one and assist Jackie a bit. Those are all of the ITT costs. That would be one, for the IT equipment that they use at the municipal court. Very similar and in line to what we have been discussing previously. I think Andy Hawkins is also on the line if you wanted to go into some more detail with this one.
Okay, but not, again, completely in line with the other budgets we've been looking at and the other kinds of expenses that we've been talking about.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, that's correct. This municipal court being primarily general fund funded, is just paying for the costs of IT and fleet, which I think it's mostly IT because the municipal court doesn't have a real big fleet, as you would imagine.
Right. Okay. And then on the law enforcement contractual and utilities line item, again, I'm not so much concerned about the utilities as what contracts are you cutting that make up that 160,000?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero, that would include those that Judge Behill was discussing. That was the IHS contract, which was the DUI and the teen court.
Okay. And not contributing to teen court at all?
Mr. Chair, Counselor Romero, we are not, but we are still sending teens to the county through teen court, which they will be participating.
And that is a direct result of the financial situation we're in. We wouldn't be doing that normally, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And then just to finish out then, the other operating costs of $8,000, that same kind of thing? Is that services from other city entities?
Counselor, that is actually other supplies that we cut the costs that we were able to do so for the DOI program for home detention.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are all the questions I had. I just wanted a little bit more detail on those line items.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks Judge Hill for joining us, and also your staff for joining us. Just had a clarification on that one piece. So I understand the reduction for other operating was pretty significant, but aren't you all then still utilizing IT and fleet, but just not at the same level, or what exactly was reduced? I don't understand.
I'm not sure we understand your question, Counselor Villarreal. Would you point to the line item you're referring to?
It's general fund. It's the other operating that we were just talking about and the reduction that you all had. And I was just curious what shifted. I mean, you probably still have the same level of IT needs from services from other city entities. So I'm just curious, what then did you cut? What was the reduction then?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal, in the past couple of years, we had purchased all new computers for municipal court, which was a huge expense for the court. We bought video equipment, which IT participated in assisting with that. That was for the video arraignments to the detention center. So those are kind of one-time expenses to some degree for the next few years.
Okay, that makes sense. I was just trying to figure out, because I'm sure, I just assumed you all have even more IT support now that you're doing a lot of things virtually. So I was trying to figure out what the reduction was. The other thing I wanted to just understand better is the fund title for law enforcement. Is that the same fund that we had discussed in another, I don't know which department it was, but I was assuming the law enforcement fund was a CYFD grant, or is that something else? No.
I can tell you that we do not receive any grants. The law enforcement section, the 223s, those have been worked out with Miss McCoy. So Miss McCoy might better be able to answer those.
Mr. Chair, Counselor, yes, this is Fund 223, the law enforcement fund has been utilized in several different departments. We can go ahead and provide you a breakdown of that if that would assist in understanding not only the expenditures out of this for each of the different funds, but also the revenue into this fund.
Right, that would help, because I believe it was community services and they had a law enforcement fund. I think it was the same number, but it was a CYFD grant.
There are multiple, correct, Mr. Chair, Counselor, there are multiple departments. We can go ahead and break that down for you.
That would be helpful. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. Thank you all.
Thank you, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Judge Hill, for being here, and Jackie, thank you as well. I had a quick question about, so I heard that 3 things that were no longer happening, the animal control median, because that's been moved to civil, no longer doing the homeless court, correct?
Correct.
And does that mean that it's no longer occurring, or we're just no longer doing it?
No, we are seeing the homeless population in our regular courts now.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then also, it's been mentioned not contributing to teen court. Do we have an idea of how that's going to impact that service?
No, we don't, because we contribute to them. They budget for the service, and it's a Santa Fe County city contribution, and I think it's run mostly by Santa Fe County. I do know that for the longest time, most of their referrals did come from the city municipal court. And because that's been lessened now, I don't know how it's going to impact their program, because I'm not engaged in how their program actually runs or what their budget is. I would imagine they have a lesser population participating.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I understand. And how much did we use to contribute?
I think it was 40,000. Is that correct, Ms. Baca?
That is correct.
48,000? Okay,
40,000 annually.
40,000.
40,000, thank you.
Yeah.
And then did I miss any other services that were being changed or altered or that we were no longer contributing to?
The DUI drug court services, we had a sole source provider for that, counselor, and that contract no longer exists. And I really want to sort of underscore this. There are silver linings in this transition through COVID. One of them being that we are now doing a lot of what that service provider did in-house. Plus, we're customizing treatment for the participants in DUI drug court. As it was before that, that sole source provider provided all of the treatment components. And now we're using more of community-based treatment components. For example, if a DUI drug court participant does get accepted by Santa Fe Recovery, Santa Fe Guidance Center, or other services that are available through the community, we're trying to implement that treatment component outside of that contract. So it's actually been working thus far. The jury's still out. We don't know exactly how it will work, but we're trying to be creative when we did this.
Still muted, sorry. Thank you so much for explaining those changes and for showing us what that silver lining is. So I do look forward to hearing some more updates on how these processes continue to evolve as we move through this. Those were all my questions, unless I missed anything else that would fall under this category. Nope. Okay, thank you so much. Those were all my questions.
Councilwoman Vihil Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Judge Vihil. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I'm very glad to hear about what you're doing with DUI drug court. As you know, it's a program that I have experience with at the district court, and it's an excellent program. And I'm glad you're, continuing to push ahead with it, because it's something that can yield great results. And kudos to you for doing that. My next question has to do with the public defender employee that we have at the city. And I brought this up during the budget presentation for, I already forgot what it's called, the Community Health and Safety Department. Well, as you know, the public defender for the city is housed in community services under Kira Ochoa. And then that department is being reduced to, I guess, division level under this new public safety arena. And so the public defender's status goes further down into the organization. With putting it in this new community health and safety department, it's housed in there with alongside the police department. And so my concern was the placement of it, and that it would be in the same department as those who charge the defendants who need public defense with, crimes of whatever nature. So I've not been a proponent of the location of the public defender since I began my term as city councilor, because I don't think it's on an equal playing field. And like we have, say, in state government, we've got the DA's office and the public defender's office. Then at City Hall, we've got a fairly well-funded city attorney's office housing the prosecutor. And then we've got the public defender way down in the dungeons of city government. I had raised the issue earlier that perhaps the public defender's office could be housed in municipal court. I can't think of anywhere else it would go, but better than where it is now, which I think is misplaced. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the public defender and the prosecutor are both housed in municipal court. How they have been separated from us is to avoid the conflict of interest. And so initially, as the last I knew, because I'm not involved in those administrative decisions, is the public defender was with the city manager's office. I didn't know about any of the reorganization and placing them in the community services department. I think my only concern would be that they not be under the authority of the municipal court, because they do need to be supervised separately from the court where they represent their clients from. But they are housed in municipal court. Ideally, it would be good to house both the prosecutor and the public defender elsewhere to avoid any kind of conflict of interest, perception or otherwise. However, it's awfully convenient to have them in municipal court. And I think that one time there was a proposal that they be housed because we're next to the police department at the police department, and that would create separation of conflict of interest with the municipal court. So not having been a part of any of those decisions, the only thing I can tell you is what we currently have is working very well. You know, both the public defender and the prosecutor and myself are well aware of not violating any code of conduct with regard to knowing where our barriers are. So I'm okay with the way it is right now.
Okay.
And I have not seen any conflict of interest with them being housed in municipal court. And I think administratively, I don't have really much say so in terms of who supervises them.
Right. I was just wondering your opinion about the housing. Now, do they actually have full-time offices at the court?
Yes, they do. And they
Okay.
visit with clients there, and they visit with police officers, and it's sort of a central focus for cases to be processed.
Okay. Now, no, they aren't, the public defender isn't housed with the city manager and hasn't been for, at least, I don't even know when, but it's in community services right now under Kira Ochoa. And with reorganization, it'll be lowered down. But I mean, the concern I had though, and maybe you've allayed that concern, is that it now will be in there with the police department in the same organization, same chain of command. So that was a concern, but I just, organizational chart wise, it just doesn't seem to have equal footing. And I suppose the reason it's working is because the people in those positions are being able to make it work. And that's what I hear you say.
It does work.
Okay. Okay, well, I appreciate your answer and thank you for working on drug court. Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, is there a motion regarding the municipal court budget?
Move to approve.
Second,
We have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so now let's move to city clerk / council and constituent services.
Good afternoon, Chair Beta, councilors. Happy Monday. You guys are on the downward turn here. You're almost done. Yay. So today I want to talk to you about the city clerk's office. As you see on your screen right now, community engagement department is going to be comprised of the city clerk's office and the council and constituent services office. So I will present on the city clerk's office, and then Christine will present on council and constituent services. The city clerk's office has 2 employees besides myself here in the office, and we have an assistant city clerk and an office assistant. We have the mail and duplicating office. There's 3 employees in there. We have a supervisor and 2 duplicating technicians. We have graphics, and that is 1 graphic artist. And then we have records management. So currently we have 2 vacancies. One is in the records management specialist position and the office manager of the city clerk's office. In the contractual services, so the reduction that you see on salary and wages is we have the 2 vacancies, as I stated. On contractual services, we have done a reduction based off of we will not be providing stenographers for all city meetings, and we have started that. That's been a couple of weeks now. So the committees that are receiving stenographers to do minutes are the Planning Commission, Board of Adjustment, the H Board, Archaeological, and the governing body meetings. For all the other meetings, the staff will be composing those minutes and submitting those for approval. Contractual services also includes our liquor hearing officer and our codifier for our city code. Under repairs and maintenance, we have done a reduction there, and repairs and maintenance mostly covers our mailroom and duplicating equipment. And we have been able to do a reduction based off of the number of copies that we are currently running. With City Hall closed, we're not running as many copies, so we were able to do a reduction. The copy charges are included, in the maintenance contracts. Under supplies, this is just very general office supplies, our clothing and uniforms, gasoline, any software subscriptions, and auto parts. Insurance, insurance I would refer to the finance director if you have any questions on that. Our other operating costs, those include printing and publishing. That's like we publish our notice of public hearings, our adoptions of ordinances, and our weekly meeting list. It also includes dues, services of other departments, postage and delivery service, and rental of postage equipment. And we were able to do a good chunk of that reduction based off of our postage. And that, again, because city offices aren't open, so not as much mail and shipments are going out. The transfers out, that's in our public campaign financing fund. So currently we have $797,924 in that fund. So we were only shy a little over $2,000 of coming up with the $800,000 that's required by code. And that says that if we have $800,000 in the code, we're not required to put in the $150,000 per budget cycle. And that's pursuant to 9-3.4 of our city code.
Can you repeat that, Yolanda? The amount that we have, the balance? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Right. We have $797,924. So to get to the 800,000, it was going to be $2,076. That's why we didn't have to budget for that 150,000, the full 150,000. And I would stand for any questions.
Great, thank you. Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Thank you. Thank you, Yolanda, for being here. So can we just walk through this again? And can we focus on what's being cut, not what's in the line items? So I got the salaries and wages. You have 2 vacancies. Then in the contractual and utilities, again, I'm not so concerned about the utilities as what are the contracts that are being cut in that $133,200.
That would be the stenographer contracts.
Okay, completely.
No, as I mentioned.
Oh, but
we
it
are-
has utilities, sorry.
Yeah, we will still be providing stenographer services for the meetings that I mentioned.
Right, okay. But the amount of the cut, the 133,200 is all for stenographers, or is there some utilities in there that are being cut as well?
Utilities as well.
Okay. And then if we just jump down to other operating costs, the 47,391, what specifically is being cut?
So on that, we did a reduction in printing and publishing, about
Okay.
3,000. We cut dues. The bulk of that, as I mentioned, was under postage. That was 20,500. Travel, all travel was deleted from the budget. Those were the main reductions.
Okay, that's helpful. And then skipping down again to the public campaign financing. So I'm a little confused. So we have $797,924 in the account. Did we put 2,076 in there to bring it up to 800,000 or?
I requested that amount. I would refer to or defer this question to the finance director.
Because I don't see it here in your budget, right? It's not reflected in any of these line items, I don't think.
Mr. Chair, Counselor, the $150,000, I can ask Andy to go into a little bit more detail, but under general fund, the transfer out, we have included 150,000. This is a transfer from the general fund to the public campaign finance fund. Andy, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, just that the enabling city code requires that 150,000 per year by the virtue of its language.
Okay, but I think this is where, yeah, so Yolanda, maybe you can clarify. What Yolanda said is if we were at 100,000, we don't have to put in the 150,000.
Right.
And so so really all we need this year is 2,076 to bring us up to the 800,000. We don't need the full 150. So
That's
I
correct.
think we may be putting in more money than we need.
Well,
That's
Counselor, I would definitely agree that it's more that needs to be in here. But my understanding was from talking to Yolanda a couple of years ago about it, and maybe I'm remembering this incorrectly, but the enabling city code or ordinance that enabled this requires $150,000 per year in its language.
Yes,
Now,
but
Yolanda might be a little-
but we made some code changes. So Yolanda.
If you'd like, I can read the section. It's 934E. And it says the deposit to the fund shall not be made if the balance in the fund prior to the deposit exceeds $800,000. If a deposit to the fund would cause the balance in the fund to exceed $800,000, only so much of the deposit shall be made as will increase the balance to that amount and no more. So that would be the $2,076.
So Mary, if we could look at that, I don't think it needs a full 150. And this was I believe this was part of the legislation and the changes that were made after the last election to make sure that this fund didn't accumulate more money than was necessary to provide for public financing as we go into the election cycle that's in front of us.
So if I could
Mr.
add.
Chair, Counselor, yes, we can take a look at that. We'll work with Yolanda and we'll provide an update.
Okay, so I think that line item can be decreased. All right, and then just to go back to the public campaign financing, there's, what kinds of things were in there? I guess that was when we were rolling out ranked choice voting, is that right? And that's all that stuff was budgeted for ranked choice voting, public education, or why have we not in FY19, FY20 had any money in those line items?
Chair Beta, Councillor Romero, Worth, councillors. This fund is specifically for public financing. It doesn't cover any election costs. It's specifically for public financing. So for those candidates that apply and qualify for public financing, that's what this fund is used for. The election fund.
That 214, sorry.
I'm sorry?
So the fund number is 214 and it says public campaign financing, contractual and utilities. In FY18 actuals was 155,000. Then there's a line item for other operating costs, 68,958, and then transfers out 109,000. That's all the fund itself that pays for publicly financed candidates?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, Counselor, we can provide you with a breakdown of what was spent in FY18 in those categories.
Well, and I think if there was anything spent in 19 or 20.
Of course.
Yeah, it's just weird that those are blank in 19 and 20, and then in 21 they're blank. So maybe they're blank in 21 because, yeah, we're not there yet, but.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, this fund has activity in election years. In years where there aren't elections, the activity drops to nil.
Right. Okay.
So that's why you see it zeroed out. Those are actually correct numbers. They're zeroed out because there was no election to spend the money on.
Councilor Villarreal is shaking her head.
Right. I mean, we had an election since 18.
Yeah.
So if you can look into that, because I would think there would be expenses in FY20, because I think that's when we had an election, but I could be wrong.
Last November.
Mr. Chair, Councilors, we'll look into that. We'll work with Yolanda, the city clerk. There's also in the city clerk's budget an elections section. And so some of the expenses may have been in the elections section, but we will provide you all of that detail and with a breakout between what was funded by the general fund versus what was funded by the public campaign financing fund.
Okay,
thank you. We'll have all that information and then we'll be able to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Councilor Romero Worth, for bringing that up, because I couldn't quite understand why it was broken down that way and that there was zeroed out and no expenses on the campaign financing line items. So I guess when we get the revised one, the transfers out would be corrected, and then the public campaign financing rows would then be populated, and the change would only be that missing section or the missing amount, which was 2,000 something, right? Yolanda?
Yes, $2,076.
Okay. And Yolanda, can you describe to me, now that there's certain things your office doesn't have to do any longer in terms of elections and preparations and budgets, what was adjusted in this next round for this budget that reflects that specifically?
Thank you for the question. There really wasn't much adjustment for this election cycle because it really won't start till next fiscal year. So meaning July of 21 would be when expenses would start coming in. So this is basically our off year,
Okay,
even though, petitions and everything will start at the beginning of next year, but the expenditures won't be till after July of 21.
so if there was, for some reason, a ballot question that we may or may not anticipate, I don't know what that would be, but anything that we're looking at to cover costs for infrastructure, if that's the case, would that then be added in July? And the only reason I'm asking this is because I'm worried that if we end up having to do some like outreach to understanding certain bond questions or ballot questions, that we'd have to do it at the beginning of 21.
Thank you, Councilor Villarreal, Chair Beta, councilors. I would work with Director McCoy to then prepare a budget. We didn't anticipate any special elections or any special issues coming up. So therefore, we didn't budget for anything. But if something should arise, then yes, I would work with Director McCoy.
Okay, I don't have anything in particular that I'm thinking of, but I was just thinking, just in case something does come up and it does need to be a ballot initiative where we need to do more education and outreach, if we had funding just in case something comes up before July of next year.
Thank you. I don't know if there would be a mid-year budget review as well. That could be another time that we could, increase the election budget.
Okay. Just because I was thinking about ranked choice and how much money ended up we had to allocate in order to prepare for that and do education and outreach that wasn't initially in the budget. So I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to be cautious. But if we're doing updates on budgets, I guess finance, you would look at that if that was something we needed to consider in at the beginning of 2021.
Mr. Chair, councilors, yes, we would be bringing you, as the city clerk mentioned, a proposed budget to review for your approval.
Okay, thank you. And Yolanda, what were the positions you said were vacant?
Yeah, they are an office manager, that's in my office, and a records management specialist.
And are those frozen or?
Yes.
Okay, those are frozen. Okay, thank you. That's all I
You're
have.
welcome.
Okay, I'm gonna actually ask for a motion on the city clerk's budget because it's still a separate department. And as we've talked, I think there's a little bit of confusion. But the reorg is something that's gonna be approved maybe the end of August. So let's, is there a motion regarding the city clerk's budget?
Counselor, Mr. Chair, I think we need to see a revision before we can approve this. There's too much money in that general fund transfer out.
Okay, is there a motion to postpone the city clerk's
Motion
budget?
to postpone.
Second.
Mr. Chair, councilors, if I may, you can move to reduce the budget by the amount that is necessary.
All
That
right,
way
then
we do not have to postpone.
I withdraw my motion. Well, but the other thing is, shouldn't we see the FY, I don't know where it fell, FY19, FY20 actuals for the public campaign financing fund?
Mr. Chair, councilors, since the last election was in fiscal year 20, those expenses would have been in fiscal year 20. We are continuing to close out the year, but we will get you our best estimate of those expenses out of the public campaign financing fund. Since they were in the fall, we'll have a pretty good accounting of those expenses for the public campaign financing fund. But in order to proceed and not to delay any further, the motion can be made to reduce the operating transfer out.
Okay, so I then would withdraw my motion
Okay, as a second withdrawn.
Withdraw a second.
and I would move to approve the city clerk's budget, but change the general fund line item transfers out from 150,000 to 2,076.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Now a roll call, please.
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signey Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes. Okay, so that motion passes. Let's hear now from constituent and council services.
Hey, Councilor Chair Abeka, City Council. My budget is pretty simple. I can walk through. I do want to mention that it looks like on the contractual contracts and utilities, it looks like there's an increase. It's actually just a realignment of our Comcast franchise fees. So that's probably the item to note in the budget, but if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to address them. I know Councilor Romero Worth has asked kind of what is not being funded this year. And so most of the contractual money, again, it looks like there's an increase. There's a transfer in on one of the franchise fees for our Comcast franchise fees. But really the biggest thing is probably the money for our website redevelopment. There's still money in our contractual line item for that. It was just reduced to accommodate our overall budget reduction.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
So I do have questions on this department budget in the salaries and wages line item and benefits. So because I don't quite understand, I know there's been a lot of movement in terms of positions. So at one point we had budgeted 2 council staff people. I don't know what we call them. And to my knowledge, and then we have some constituent services folks, and I don't know what's happened with those FTEs. So I don't know if they morphed into something else, and I know, we had some folks who left, and they're, they had leave or whatever that was taking us through, I think, the last fiscal year. And just maybe if you could just walk through how all that lays out, because I know at one point we had 2 positions that were supposed to be dedicated to staffing the council, and I believe we only have 1 or that I'm aware of. So maybe you can help me understand how that all shook out.
Correct, Councilor. Hold on one moment, please.
And if we have 1, and if there's 1, if there's a council position, staff position, did we cut that second one, or are we freezing it, and is it reflected in these numbers, or how does that work?
Councilor, there's still 2 positions, as you mentioned, council liaison positions. One was frozen as part of the overall freezing for hiring, but there are still 2 positions. And at some point in the year, there were 2 positions filled, and then one of the liaisons left. So, right,
So
Jennifer is the sole council liaison at this time.
And so
the position is still there.
But it's not reflected in the line item, right? Because the line item shows a percentage change of, sorry, my 32,000 or a, if that position is frozen, shouldn't that savings be reflected in that line item?
Yes, Councilor Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, there's been a few position movements as well. within our department, as you mentioned, one of those changes was that the communications director position came under my department, as well as another communication position. So although we have vacancy savings, other positions have been transferred in, and part of that kind of made the offset of the overall salary and benefits.
Okay, so I guess my overall concern is we still have 2 council liaison positions, just we have one that's frozen and one that's filled.
Correct.
And then how many constituent services positions are there? 2?
There's one, yes, one constituent services position. I'm sorry, Councilor Chair, Councilor Romero, there's one constituent services position, and then there's another public engagement specialist position. Both are filled.
Both are filled. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So my biggest concern is I don't want to lose our council liaison position. So as long as that's there and it's frozen, fine. I just want to make sure that it's not being cut. Because if anything, we need more of those, not less of them. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can you walk us through this again, Christine? Because for the constituent services, there used to be 4 positions. And so 2 were filled. And now you're saying we just have 1 liaison?
Filled. Councilor Chair, Councilor Villarreal, one is filled.
So one is
One's frozen.
One's frozen.
One is frozen. And so what happened to the other 2?
I'm sorry, can you clarify?
And then I want to remember, I can't remember, did one of them then get moved into what is called public engagement position?
Councilor Chair, Councilor Villarreal, yes, one of the positions that was previously a constituent services position was retitled into public engagement. The other positions are frozen.
Okay, so we have 1 liaison, 1 is frozen. We have who's filling the public engagement position?
Esperanza fills the public engagement position.
Okay. And then, okay. So we really just have 1 frozen constituent services and 1 frozen council liaison position. Am I missing any others?
No, what I got, Christine, was we have 1 constituent services, which is Izzy, right?
Correct.
We
Yes.
have 1 public engagement, which is Esperanza. We have 1 council liaison, which is Jennifer, and 1 vacant council liaison.
Councilor Chair, that's correct.
Okay, so we don't have another constituent services frozen position anymore. Okay, so for the communications then, is communications director then folded into this budget?
Councilor Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal, yes.
And is that position staying open then?
I am temporarily filling that position, and we are looking to re-advertise that position.
Okay. All right, and see if I have any other questions. So even, well, you said it still ended up being an increase in salary because the communications director got folded in?
Yes.
Okay.
Councilor Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal, that is correct. There is the communications position. They also included in that budget is the public information officer position from the police department. So you'll see those 2 positions added into my budget.
So the police PIO is under yours now, under this particular budget?
Councilor Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal, that is correct.
And is that position going to stay as a full-time PIO, but just for police?
Councilor Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal, the intent of the positions is actually to help separate. They will be assisting PD, yes, as well as other departments with public information.
Good idea. So they'll be asked to look at other aspects of public relations and press releases and other aspects citywide, not just for PD?
Councilor Chair and Councilwoman Villarreal, yes, that is correct. The idea is to have the positions kind of cover more departments and then also be able to leverage those two resources into more information distribution and better engaging our constituents by pushing out more information across multiple departments.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks for the clarity.
On that point,
Yes, Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Mr. Chair, can we get an FTE list of who's in this? Can we just have that memorialized?
Yes,
Mr. Chair, councilors, yes, we can provide that. We are providing a list as was requested last week of all of the positions filled and vacant in each of the departments. So that will also include community engagement in that.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Christine, I know one of our bigger challenges or requests that I've received a lot of is for Spanish constituent outreach. What in this budget supports that, if anything? And then I think that that's a real place that we need to look and see if there's any possibility of increasing in this budget, because I think that that's a real big challenge that we have, is making sure that we're getting Spanish language out. I know that we identified about $3,000 in the council budget that we didn't really know existed, and that could potentially be utilized for some interpretation and or translation services. So Christine, can you let me know what we already have here?
Sure, Councilor Chair, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez. One of the biggest changes to all of this is with the introduction of the Comcast franchise fees being placed into my budget. Then we have access to additional funding, and part of that is looking at not only translating our meetings into Spanish, but then some of our materials as well. So that's where some of that's going to be coming from. And then you'll also see a slight increase in my printing and publishing budget. That's to accommodate further translation. And there's other services that we're looking at, but there is money set aside for those within those areas.
Thank you, Christine. I'm really glad to hear that that is something that we are actively pursuing. Do we think that the funding will be enough? So when I'm assuming that you mean interpreting our council meetings. I know I sometimes use the wrong verbiage there, but would that be an actual live interpretation of our council meetings?
Councilor Chair, Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez, yes, that is the goal. That's what we're looking at, and we're currently working through that. Joe and myself have been working on different options. And one thing I do want to mention that I have not is we're also working on coordinating with some of our local nonprofits to see if there's ways that we can kind of highlight information that would be more beneficial, as well as building out some very specific Spanish distribution email lists for information. So there's a lot going on, but we're really excited to see how we can move this forward over the next fiscal year.
That's really encouraging to hear. And this is something that I definitely would like to be getting regular updates on so that we can adjust as necessary. So if we are finding that the funding that we are allocating here now is going to be sufficient for meeting these needs and for providing those interpretations and translations, as well as those additional Spanish language outreach avenues, that'd be great. But if it's not, I really think that this is something that we should be prioritizing as we move forward. The other one to think about is sign language, if that is something that we are exploring. Christine, have we started to look into that yet?
Councilor Chair, Councilwoman, excuse me, Cassett Sanchez. We've done some minor exploratory with sign language, but we also have an ADA coordinator who's been helping with some of this, and he's actually in the public works position. But we've been taking recommendations from the state level board. So those will continue. I will definitely say that more of our focus has been on some of the Spanish information, but we have not lost sight of the sign language as well. And oh, sorry, just to continue that, we have added since I've in recent months, the captioning of all of our videos that we put online. We have added the captioning to our Facebook information as well. So we have kind of done a lot of the closed captioning on any of the information we're putting out, including on our council videos, council meetings, and any of our city council subcommittee meetings.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm really happy to hear that. Thank you so much for continuing to move forward with this. And again, this is something that I really want to make sure that we keep our eye on. And if the funding here is not sufficient, I think this should be one of the highest priorities that we have for making sure that all of our residents can really access city government. So thank you so much. Those are all my questions.
Councilwoman Vihil Coppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to the FTEs for community engagement and or constituent services. When my recollection, when we first started this whole idea, we started in one budget process and approved 4 positions. So, and I understand that, you know, since then, other things have happened. But so going back to the constituent services liaisons, we had 2. One was Izzy and one was Jeremy. And then we had a position, I think you filled, Christine. And then we had another one called Neighborhood Network, some kind of title like that. And that person's responsibilities was to coordinate with the HOAs, of which we have quite a few in the city. So what has happened with that emphasis? And that I know that we specifically discussed how that position could be helpful in the city because we have a lot of HOA issues. And can you refresh what did that position morph into, and what emphasis, if any at all, is on the neighborhood network and HOA stuff?
Councilor Chair, Councilwoman Vihil Coppler, that position has not morphed into any other position. It's still the neighborhood engagement coordinator position. It was advertised and interviewed multiple times over the last year. It was not filled and it is now frozen with the other position. So it is still on the roll. It has not morphed, and it is a position that that is still within our department budget and our POL. It's just frozen like the others at this point because of COVID.
Okay, so
On that point, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilwoman.
And
Romero.
it is, that position is more than just a coordinating HOAs, right?
well,
I don't,
I recall.
I actually, I don't think I've ever heard it described as a coordinating HOAs, because I don't know that we have any control over HOAs.
No.
So, yeah.
I'm Councilor Romero Worth. I'm not insinuating that it's just an HOA, but that was one of the benefits of what this position could work with. I don't know about you and any of the other counselors, but I get a lot of HOA questions, attendance at HOAs. We have issues that they believe are the city responsibilities, not HOAs. I mean, there's a whole magnitude of things that come my way with HOAs, but no, the position wasn't necessarily just HOAs, but that was one of the things that could be, or I know, because I wrote the job descriptions or helped write them. And working with HOAs was one of the described duties. But more importantly, getting out in the neighborhoods and working with neighborhoods, that was a big emphasis of that position. So getting back to the FTEs, and I know we're going to get this, and I'm glad to hear Ms. McCoy say that they're working on it, because it's a really important part of our budget. It's something I had hoped we would have seen last week so that we could understand this more and not have to take so much time understanding where these positions went. But so if Jeremy's old position is frozen, and I'm going to have to use names because that's the only way I can keep track. So it's Izzy and Jeremy, the two council liaisons. The third one was the one I just spoke of, neighborhood, whatever you want to call it, neighborhood network or engager or whatever. That's a third one, that's frozen. Christine, yours was one of the four, so that's four. So where did Jennifer's position come from? What position was used for that?
Councilor Chair, Councilwoman Viho Coupler, Jennifer is in a council liaison position.
So but we only, okay, so that may be the operational time. We only had 2 approved in the budget before last. And so then that would be Jeremy's position?
Councilwoman Vihel Coppler and Christine, I think you also we had Sebastian Gurule's position, we had Therese Prada's position. There was like 3 or 4 other positions, maybe 3, that became vacant, right?
Councilor Chair, yes. For clarification, Izzy's in a constituent services position. As you mentioned, I hate to use names for positions, but I understand it's helpful. She's in Therese Prada's vacated position. And then there's 2 council liaison positions. Jennifer occupies one of those positions.
On that point, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Councilwoman.
So basically, everyone, so we don't use names, there are 2 constituent services positions and 2 council liaison positions, correct?
That is correct, Councilor Romero.
Right. But you called one position a public engagement. So is there a public engagement too? I guess maybe we should wait for the list.
Councilor Chair, Councilwoman Romero Worth, you are correct. There were title changes, but essentially you have 2 constituent services positions and 2 council liaison positions. And there are 2 people in the council constituent services positions, and there is 1 person in one of the 2 council liaison positions. I hope that helps clarify.
Okay, well, I'll stop my questioning in on this because I know it's taking up time, but I'm really interested in receiving the FTE count that Councilor Romero Worth asked for. And of course, interested in receiving the entire city FTE listings by department where these people are. So thank you very much.
Okay, is there a motion regarding constituent and council services budget?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that budget is approved, and that concludes all of our departments with the exception of the 2 that were postponed. The first being Public Works. Now, Public Works, the reason for the postponement was we wanted to have more discussion regarding the parks piece, maintenance and some recreation. So I think what I'll do is I'll open it up to questions from the committee and see if we could start there. And if we need more information, it'll come from those questions. Who wants to start?
Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Romero Worth.
we were gonna get a list of where the park staff positions were going. Was that true? Are we still gonna get that?
Okay.
And I think there's some confusion about how many positions we're talking about. I thought there were 4, and then it was suggested to me that maybe there are 13 that are being moved.
Yeah, who can tell us how many positions are being moved, proposed to be moved into Public Works to deal with parks?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, this is Bernadette. There are 13 positions, and we can get you that list here in just a few minutes.
And 4 are being transferred to other places, or 13 are being transferred?
All 13 will be transferred. There were some vacant positions within the parking division, so some of them will remain in a different job title, but still in that division, and then remaining employees will be transferred to other departments.
So you can get us the list of where those positions are being transferred to, correct? Where those
Yes.
employees are being moved.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I don't know, John, if you want to address this, but can you describe to us what is being proposed as far as the parks, these employees that'll be moving to Public Works? What will their duties be? What's going to happen?
So, okay, Mr. Chair, and if I can reach out to Bern, are we talking about parks or parking? Because the third, if you could please give me 1 second.
So it's my understanding there was 13 positions within Parks and Recreation that were going to be moved over to Public Works. And then there's an additional 4 parking positions that are going to move to different areas of the city, not just parks.
So, Mr. Chair, I think there might be a bit of a confusion. There were 13 people from parking. That was our off-street parking staff, parking attendants that were going to move from their current position to other positions. 3 of those people were going to stay within parking under different positions. Others were going to move to our water division, to parks, and to the convention center. With regards to the parks department, not parking, my understanding is, or the parks division, excuse me, parks and MRC, almost their entire staff and structure are going to be moving over to Public Works. There may be some coordinators that may move somewhere else. I'm not sure, but the primarily all the operation staff in parks is moving over to Public Works. We're basically going to take it as is.
Okay, and can you describe some of the operations that they currently conduct now?
In parks, yeah, Mr. Chair, councilors. So parks is primarily responsible for the maintenance and operation of our parks, trails, medians, and open spaces. There's also the MRC and the golf course, maintenance of those infrastructures, as well as operation of the golf course itself. We do have, our parks does have some coordinator positions, such as Barb Lopez, who helps manage who uses our parks and when. But that's primarily their function.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between maintenance and operations? How would you define each one?
Mr. Chair, councilors, so maintenance and operation, I almost consider them one and the same. It just kind of goes together. So maintenance is, well, they're similar. So maintenance is if something breaks, if a sprinkler head busts, they go and replace the sprinkler head. Operations would be running the sprinklers, mowing the grass, things like that. So small maintenance items, if something goes out that can be handled, that doesn't need to be handled as part of a major reconstruction project, they would maintain that. operations is just making sure the facilities are up and running on a day-to-day basis, mowing, irrigating, things of that nature.
Okay, and then what do you consider, what do we consider like the scheduling of parks or the coordinating of activities in the parks or at the, the golf course or MRC?
So the coordinating of the activities, that is, and the operation of the golf course, that is the programmatic part of parks. From my understanding, I don't have a whole lot of intimacy with that, but that has ran fairly smooth. Different leagues that have different rights to different parks at different times, that's coordinated through a focal point, and its coordination works well. From what I understand, some of the issues that happen is the people that do use the parks is the condition of the parks themselves and those people's experience with the parks.
Okay, so the programmatic piece, are those positions moving over to Public Works also, or is the programming going to stay with recreation?
If I don't want to speak inaccurately, if I can ask either Mary or Byrne to clarify that.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, councilors, at this time, all of the parks positions are moving over to Public Works. Everything that was in that division, vacant and filled, we have moved over into Public Works. As Mr. Romero did indicate, there are some adjustments that may need to be made as we move forward to better align what is considered programmatic positions and make sure those are reporting to the right person in the organizational structure.
Okay. Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a place that I'm really struggling with this is I feel those programmatic pieces are better aligned in recreation. John Romero, last time you really described some of the maintenance pieces and why bringing that into Public Works could be beneficial. And I do see that. I think that is something to look at, but I think the coordination of these recreation pieces, of this programmatic pieces, this is where I'm having a really hard time with the breakup of Parks and Rec. And as we're looking at this budget and what these pieces look like, I think that is much better aligned with recreation. So it sounds like there's still some uncertainty right now. Mary, maybe you weigh in on this, but with the passing of this budget, what I'm hearing is that moves all of those programmatic pieces into parks at the moment.
Mr. Chair, Councilor, yes, all of the positions will be moving into
Public Works.
Into Public Works.
Right. So, and then Mary, maybe you can help, because we kind of have two separate issues right now. We have this reorganization, which is, as Councilor Abeta mentioned, is something that we really will be dealing with in August. But it is tied to this budget at the moment in this sense. I essentially don't want to waste our time looking at reorganization right now when what we need to be looking at is dollars and cents. So I'm curious how pertinent this part of this conversation is at the moment as opposed to in August.
Mr. Chair, Councilor, at this point, each of these organizations are individual divisions. So for example, Parks is still an independent division regardless of where in the organizational structure it sits. Same with the municipal MRC or even recreation. And so if there were, the budgets can be passed independently. I think we've been moving forward and voting on, the committee has been voting on each of the budgets for each of these organizations as we're moving forward. So if it is the pleasure of the committee or council to make adjustments in the future, we can, to the organizational structure, we can also do that. You know, if for example, I think there was a part of the conversation was two examples that arose last week was recreation. You know, where in the organizational structure should recreation live, and where in the organizational structure should, I believe the other one was MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. So again, if those are independent divisions and can be, you know, reassigned into another organizational unit, if so desired, you know, by council action.
Right. Mary, I guess it would be my position that just because we approve the Public Works Department budget doesn't mean that we're approving parks being in Public Works at this time. Right, because the reorg still has to be officially adopted by the governing body, which includes the movement of parks into Public Works. So rather, I think and the reason why we're having this discussion now is that if there's a strong feeling one way or another, which it sounds like there might be, especially in relations to the programmatic piece, let's take this opportunity to give that direction now so that as they prepare the reorganization, the staff knows that at least this is how some members of the finance committee or the finance committee feels about parks in particular being in Public Works.
So, Mr. Chair, there's two parts to your question. There's the technical piece and the legal piece. I'll defer to our city attorney, Aaron, or the city manager on the legal piece for the restructuring and the vote that will come up next in front of the committee and council next month. Currently, Parks and MRC are divisions within the Public Works Department budget. So by voting on this today, that is where in our financial structure, these two divisions will reside. In the event that through the public process of the resolution before you next month, you determine that there needs to be a different structure, we can then take a budget adjustment forward to you for approval as well. So for example, if at that time it was decided that MRC should live with recreation under community health and safety, I believe was the discussion last week. So that would then, we would bring that forward through a budget adjustment where we lower Public Works budget by the amount for MRC and we increase the budget for community health and safety. I see our city attorney, Erin, is on the Zoom call now. She can discuss the legal response to your question.
Mr. Chair, let me just interject before. There was a question that wasn't answered earlier about the 13 positions. I can tell you that the combination of Parks and MRC is about approximately 59 employees. So that can't be the number of employees transferring over or proposed. Yeah, so it's probably parking.
Yes.
Maybe or some other group.
Yeah.
Just wanted to
Aaron, did you want to address the legal question?
Sure. Chairman Abeta, councilors. For the most part, the reorg will be at the department level. Most divisions aren't described in ordinance. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. Some of the organizational units that are currently serving as more of a department level, regardless what their name is, whether it's an office or a division currently in ordinance, might become divisions. So that will be the part that's in the bill that's being proposed, but certainly the governing body can approve the budgets for departments without designating necessarily what's happening in those departments. And if the reorg does change that, we can reflect that change in the budget.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. You know, just if we are taking the time to put, you know, individuals on notice sounds nasty, but just to express our opinions on this, I really think that recreation and park programmatic pieces of park should be together and probably under community health and safety and instead of community, what do we have, development, I believe is where it is right now in the proposal. but that maintenance piece for parks, medians, trails, to me, that is making sense in public works. I'd be interested to hear what other individuals have to say. On a slightly different topic, we had some questions around MRC and around the contract with golf. That was part of, I know, this whole conversation. Can I get an update on what is happening there?
Mr. Chair, counselors, I can go ahead and take this one, John, thanks.
Okay.
There is $142,000 that was allocated in previous years for the New Mexico Golf Limited contract. At this time, we are proposing for that to be on the top of our agenda for if additional funding were to become available to be able to fund that particular contract as we move forward throughout the fiscal year.
Mr. Chair, on this point.
Councilwoman Romero Worth.
Well, I want to participate in this before we move on, but I'll let Councilor Cassette Sanchez finish.
Okay.
If you have, okay, I wanted to clarify what this contract provides and what not having this contract at the start of the fiscal year is going to mean for operations at MRC.
Mr. Chair, counselors, I would ask that John Munoz, who has managed this contract, weigh in on some of the details of the services provided by New Mexico Golf Limited.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassette Sanchez and committee members. So the contract with New Mexico Golf is with our pro shop. So they staff the pro shop, they staff the tea time, they staff lessons, and they help merchandise. So it's a key component of the golf services and recreational services that we provide. Jennifer, if I've missed anything, let me know. The other area that they do as well is emergency or urgent repairs to our golf carts. So if there's if we're low on carts and there's some carts that may not be working, then the group also steps in. But we've had a long-standing relationship with this organization, and they've provided good services as a vendor. Jennifer, anything that I missed?
No, sir, that is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Munoz. Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez.
So what does this mean? Thank you, John, for providing that. So what does this mean if we don't have this contract in place right now and we are on hold to see if other money comes in? How will this impact users and staff of the MRC?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassette Sanchez and committee members. So if without this contract, we would not be able to staff up the pro shop and figure out a way to do that. We would not be able to provide lessons. We would not be able to provide other services that this group provides and have the ability to pivot that quickly. Again, it's a vital piece of the whole recreational experience at the MRC that kids and adults utilize. So it would significantly impact the golf course.
And I'm sorry, I'm not a golfer. Can you please tell me what a pro shop provides? What it does?
I apologize, Mr. Chair, Councilor Cassette Sanchez. So, and Jennifer can also step in and provide some more granular detail, but definitely things like lessons or warm-ups. You know, generally, if we have new golfers, especially children or first-time golfers, they want to get out there and learn how to swing and what some of the rules and etiquette is or are on the golf course. Additionally, we do have merchandising that we do split the earnings with the city and with the vendor who sells the merchandising and who provides those services. Jennifer, can you step in and provide a little more granular detail in there?
Yes, John, thank you. Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Casas Sanchez. In the most simplest form, what this means is we won't be able to operate the pro shop. The pro shop offers tee times to the public. That's how they come out, have the availability to be able to play on our golf course. They won't provide instructional services for golf instruction to youth and adult. We won't be able to sell merchandise to the public. We won't be able to offer, we're the only pro shop between here in Albuquerque and northern New Mexico that offers club fittings and golf merchandise. We won't be able to function without the pro shop services that are provided under this contract.
Right, and I just want to add, Councilwoman, that one big piece that we're missing are golf tournaments that a lot of nonprofit organizations have and take advantage of. I know, having played in several myself and had some hosted there, it was always this company that we dealt with and not city staff. And so that would be a pretty big hit.
On that point, Chair?
Yes, Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you. I think it's also important to note that they also have a staff member, their staff member, that services and takes care of all the golf carts out there, which is a very, very sizable undertaking. I don't know how many of you are golfers. If you're a golfer, I'm wondering if you've ever been abusive in a golf cart before. I bet the answer is yes. And they take care of all the carts. They have 10 to 12 full to part-time employees out there during the main part of the year, and during the off part of the year, they have 4 to 5. So when I look at the number of, I believe it's 140, I think that we would go in the hole trying to fill those positions and the amount of money that it would take us. I don't think that we can, with salaries and benefit programs, I don't think we can operate and even offer minimal service for 140 with city employees. So I think it's a critical contract because I just don't think that we're prepared to fill the gaps on it. So thank you, Councilor Casas Sanchez, for letting me butt in on this, and thank you, Chair.
Okay, Ms. McCoy, we may not need the $150,000 for the clerk's budget. We saw that we only need 3,000. So can we use that money to move over here for this golf contract?
Mr. Chair, councilors, yes, that is correct. Right now, there's about 147,000 that you would have in the general fund that you would have available. So technically, since the transfer from the general fund is no longer 150,000 to the public campaign finance fund, that would then, with the last vote that was taken for the city clerk budget, that makes available 147,000. So as opposed to the original transfer that we planned from the general fund to the city clerk's budget, right, for the public campaign financing fund, that transfer would then be 142,000 from the general fund to MRC, specifically for the purposes of funding the New Mexico Golf Limited contract.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, and then Councilor Casas Sanchez, you still have.
Yeah, I don't, again, I don't want to, keep interrupting Councilor Casas Sanchez, but I am curious. So, and I agree, we have money that we just cut that we can now put another place. But I'm curious what the thinking was around cutting this contract, given its importance to the operations of the golf course. Like, how much money do we, and we haven't really seen anything on this, how much money do we make from the merchandising? What costs would we then, you know, in terms of doing tee times? I'm not so worried about the lessons and the tournaments at this point, because I don't think those are things that we can do in the current pandemic environment. So what I'm trying to understand is if for a short period of time, whatever it is, 6 months, a year, we weren't able to do this contract, what would it mean to the city? You know, who would repair the golf carts? Who would schedule the tee times? Those are the two critical pieces to the operation of the golf course. And I'm just wondering what operationally was the plan here? And is this, you know, again, if we don't have a plan and the best thing we should do right now is renew this contract, then we should use that money. But it seems to me there are a couple other places where we've identified that we might not be happy and we could put that money. So I just want to, you know, broaden the conversation a little bit and understand more directly what we thought we would do to operate the golf course by canceling this contract. Sorry, Councilor Casa Sanchez, I guess we're all like dying to jump in on this.
Mr. Munoz, what was the thinking behind eliminating this contract?
So we had when we looked at the budget, we were also looking at synergies between public works. Now, I don't have the broken down amount in front of me of how much we get from the merchandising piece, but the golf course is a very good revenue generator. On average, you bring in about $1.11 million in a season, but that's with everything loaded in, you know, green fees and rentals and other revenue streams. Jennifer, I'm not sure if you have it in front of you. I can look it up as we're talking to see how much revenue specifically we get from the pro shop.
Okay, well, we looked that up. Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez, did you have any other questions?
Well, Mary, I think this is a question for you. You know, with that extra $150,000 in the general fund, my understanding from the community is, you know, we're running out of things like housing vouchers, and that seems like a more critical use of any extra dollars that we have than opening a golf course. I understand that recreation is important. I understand that people are in need, but we've got to house our residents first during, you know, a crisis. So Mary, that $150,000, is that, if it's in the general fund, I mean, it's kind of a free for all. We can sit there and say, this is going to go to COVID response, correct?
Mr. Chair, councilors, I think over the last week, we have heard from many different departments, the areas that they have had to reduce that have involved community outreach, assisting directly, as you mentioned, is one of the areas, you know, of increased need as we are in a public health emergency. In addition, there are several areas that we've had to reduce across all departments, across all funds, that are key critical areas for us as a city to be able to respond on multiple fronts, to be able to provide services. So again, that is one potential option for the committee to vote to restore this particular contract, or to use the approximately $147,000 in another way. The administration is willing to bring back a budget adjustment to a priority. You know, again, we've spoken very many times over the last week about the priorities. So the administration can bring forward a budget adjustment of that amount to council, you know, within a few weeks as well, if that's the pleasure of the committee.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's something really important to look at. Go ahead.
And I guess my concern is, I mean, we can go anywhere and find a place to put this 150,000 because everybody's budget has been cut. But to me, this just seemed like a logical fit. The amounts are pretty close. It is a service that'll be disruptive if not And it's something that is allowed right now. At least under COVID, you can still play golf. So,
Yeah, to your point, Mr. Chair, we do need a functioning golf course, but that's why I want to know who was going to make the tee times and who was going to repair the carts if we eliminated this contract in what I think is the short term.
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero Worth, may I answer or help to answer the question?
Yes, Ms. Romero.
So in regards to what we make from our pro shop management services that are provided by New Mexico Golf, the city receives 100% revenue for tee times and golf carts. So this past fiscal year 1920, tee time revenue and our punch pass purchases totaled approximately 593,000, which the city received 100%. Our tee times, our golf cart revenue was approximately 269,000. So the city receives 100% of that. In regards to our tournament revenue that we received, we generated around 10,000 and 5% of the 10,000, and in our pro shop merchandising, 5% of 269,000. And we can provide you with our full detailed report, but that's kind of just the basics on that.
So it sounds like in addition to not being able to do these things, we'll also lose money that's used to coming in because we won't have anybody to man the pro shop or to do those things. So I guess we'll get hit twice, it sounds like. Councilwoman Cassette Sanchez, did you have anything else?
No, I'll go ahead and yield the floor. I know I see lots of blue hands, so take it away, everybody.
Thank you. Councilwoman Bell.
Did you just call on me, Chair?
Yes, you had your hand up and I didn't know if it was.
Yeah. The question I have is, aside from that general fund money, I mean, I think that we know that we've got to find a way to fund this. It's $140,000, but it's not really $140,000 because they make some money for us. And it's also a sizable asset that we can't turn our backs on. So did we have, Ms. McCoy, did we have any other, I know that I've been in discussion about this electronically, that we needed to find a way to keep this contract. Did we have any other possible sources of funding for this?
Mr. Chair, councilors, this is in several conversations has risen to the top of some of the priorities over the last week. So we can go back and research an additional source of funding for this particular contract, if that be the pleasure of the council. And again, as we've mentioned time and time again, as we identify additional funding sources, we can bring forward a budget adjustment request in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Ms. McCoy. Chair, is it an appropriate time for me to give my comments on the structure and the reorg, or would you like me to wait?
Let's go to other questions first, and then I'll come back for a round of that.
That's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on this point about the golf course contract, and we still didn't get an answer about what was the plan to run this, given this particular cut? Like how was staff going to adjust? Were they going to move folks around and end up taking on those positions? And so there's that question. And then the other question I have is, we keep talking about, well, this is an important asset and it's a sizable asset, but we have all these other sizable assets that have been cut and we cannot run them. And it's not just due to COVID. We have pools that can be open and yet we still can't open them. So I'm just not really thinking that we're looking at the bigger picture. We're kind of zeroing in on golf course, but if all of our services have been reduced across the board and our activities and facilities in our facilities have been reduced, and obviously COVID's the main culprit, but there are potential ways that we could still be doing activities, but we just don't have the staff right now. So the fact that we can't do swimming pools, and I don't understand how we could just end up moving it into a golf course. And I know there's an aspect of making revenue, but I also want to bring up that there's also an issue of equity. And if we're looking at golf courses and not looking at the big picture of our activities and facilities, then I wouldn't be able to support this, whatever change that might be brewing. So I think we need to look at a bigger picture. There's a facilities aspect, and then what Councilwoman Cassett-Sanchez brought up about the other cuts that we had made that are really around social services and the support that we're going to be needing now that we'll be heading into what will be a recovery from COVID. And so housing is going to be the big key. And so I'm not willing to move an amount of money that we think is a free for all amount right now into the golf course. I just want to understand, though, if staff could give us an idea of what they were going to do to make up for the contract that was not going to be renewed.
Who from staff wants to answer that?
Chairman, if I might, this is Regina Wheeler. We haven't really had a chance to sit down and look at this budget and really map out all the details of the operations. And that's something I think that we foreshadowed last time, that we got a great little meeting so far where we got a real sense of sort of the scope and some of the opportunities for synergy. And I think John Romero could speak to that more. We've definitely identified some opportunities, but we haven't gone through all the details. It was kind of news to us that this contract would be cut. And so we need to really figure out what we would do in the eventuality. But I wanted to, I haven't been at all the budget hearings, and I'm not sure how this has been playing in, but we do have the $10 million of CARES funding from the state that we're developing a budget for that. And a big chunk of that is going to be used for housing and voucher type and community services, meals, hotels, housing, opening, infrastructure for opening, as well as reimbursement for the money that we've already spent on the crisis. And so maybe Mary could talk a little bit about the timing there, but I think Kira and I have developed a draft budget and sent it around for some review, and housing plays significantly into, somewhere in the zone of $2 million of that. And so maybe Mary could talk about how those two mesh together.
And I hear you about that. That's an important piece. There's also a rental assistance piece that I don't think the CARES funding will be covering.
Ms. McCoy.
We have it in there for housing insecurity for preventing people from becoming homeless. But it's true, we have to go through the fine details of the funding.
Mr. Chair, councilors, we will be bringing forward a plan for the state funding application for the CARES Act funding that was approved to be distributed to local governments during the last legislative session. So that will be, in addition, on top of this current operating budget. We brought forward the operating budget first and foremost. DFA is releasing their application in preparation for us to submit our request. But primarily our focus right now is our operating budget, of which we did have rental funding to support rental assistance. That was an increase by this administration last fiscal year in FY20. We increased the support out of the general fund for rental assistance, and that has been maintained whole. And so anything from the CARES Act funding that could go to additional assistance for the items that have been mentioned by many counselors over the course of the last few months that we've been discussing the impacts of the public health crisis on the economy and on our residents. We will be bringing forward that plan that Regina and other department directors have put together for this body's review as well. So that is, again, it's on top of this current operating budget.
Good to know. To get the details would be great to find out what that would actually cover. I don't think we might know yet, but if we do have information, please share that with us. So I will end with that golf course. I mean, if there's a way to even do looking at reduced services, I mean, everybody is having to reduce our services across our facilities. So I'm surprised we didn't think about that in this vein. I know that it's allowed, but I still think that there may be things that might shift with COVID and some of the things that might be allowed in terms of activities. So just want to put that out there. The other question I had, I guess this is for, I'm not sure who would be able to answer this, but with this reorg, I'm still perplexed by how this, or if the street staff would be assisting with median support. And this has always been the push-pull, like who's going to do the median, what area they are. So does that mean that street staff will be assisting at all with medians, or will park staff then be expected to deal with all the medians, just like they were, how they were when they were Parks and Rec, but they will be moved over into Public Works and still be required to have that a priority? And I ask this because I don't think that we have enough staff as it is to be covering what we need to cover in parks, which is the parks, the trails, and then the median. So is there going to be a shift of like who takes on what once this merge happens?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll try to address that question. So yes, it's a very good question, and it's one of the primary goals of bringing parks under Public Works. Now, when we look at managing infrastructure, we don't look at it as like streets owns the streets, so they got to do everything. Similar to rec doesn't own rec, so rec doesn't have to maintain the pool, maintain the roof. We do that in facilities. It's what are those groups set up to do? So streets, those are primarily CDL drivers. They know how to manage heavy equipment, that type of thing. From my point of view, pulling those guys from those type of tasks that they're qualified to do to clean medians is not an efficient use of their time. Secondly, they don't have the equipment to do that. So the city would have to buy a whole other some more, a whole other set of weed eaters and lawnmowers and stuff like that for them. So it's more of what people are set up to do. So I do think parks is the crew themselves, not only through their qualifications and abilities, but the equipment they have is better set up to maintain the medians. That being said, there's things that streets are maybe more capable of doing. For instance, maintaining some of the hard infrastructure that we meaning the city, have given to parks because it's an open space. For instance, trail maintenance of the asphalt itself. That would be something more appropriate for our streets guys, because that's what they're experienced with. They have the equipment to manage, and so it would be things like that where we would keep really, a simple way of putting it, streets would maintain all of our hard surfaces. Parks would be helping maintain all of our plants, whether we want them or not, but however that maintenance works. But we'd definitely be looking at opportunities like that to free up their parks resources to focus more on veg management. We have met recently, all of us together, Public Works, Parks, just about how we would manage this upcoming fiscal year with our current budget constraints. And we are looking at ways of further not only prioritizing, but scheduling our park maintenance. And that's dependent on their impact to the community, as well as the potential for loss of infrastructure. So for instance, regional parks have serve a lot larger group of people, so they would have a higher priority. Regional parks would also have a higher priority because if we don't maintain those, we would lose turf, lose a lot of different things that would cost more to bring back. If we may, things on a lower priority would be parks maybe that don't have a whole lot of infrastructure that could be lost and that don't serve a whole lot of people. So we are looking at those type of things. Public Works also houses stormwater We leverage the city stormwater fee. That could be used in a huge open space that we have, which is our watersheds. And so we could look at that as an opportunity either to help or supplement parks efforts in those areas. But those are definitely things that if parks does come under public works, we would look forward to communicating across all of our divisions and see what we can do to help make things more efficient with what little resources we have.
Thank you, John. That was helpful. I mean, I guess the key is really communication between staff people and the division directors, because I hate to see situations where people are like, no, that's your job. No, that's your job. And not have the connectivity that we need, and also knowing that everybody's in it together to kind of accomplish what we need to. And so it's really going to be key for the communication piece. And I'm hoping you all can figure out the best way to do that, because you'll be larger now. But I know that the scheduling of park management already occurs now. So are you just improving upon that? Because they already have a schedule.
Yes, they definitely do, Mr. Chair, Councilor Villarreal. But maybe looking at ways of adjusting that, so that maybe there are parks that we not deliberately, but that we knowingly let go a little more than other parks. Look at those adjustments. Again, look at sharing some resources where available. And then I think another thing is sticking to our schedule. I think what oftentimes happens is we sometimes will get a request to go do something that maybe isn't a priority. So we drop everything we're doing and we go do that. And, you know, to be honest, to be frank, we're going to be a little more resistant to that, and to look at sticking to our schedule with whatever adjustments we make, and replying to constituents that, you know, it is a priority, but it's not a top priority. We do this a lot with our asphalt. You know, we oftentimes get asked to drop paving the roads that we're paving and go pave some other roads that aren't on our prioritization list. So what we do is we explain to the constituents, you know, what limited resources we have, how we come up with priorities, and why whatever respective street they have is not as high of a priority as ones that we are currently paving. So following that same train of thought.
That sounds good. And that goes for counselors too, not just your constituents. But yeah, I think that's a good plan. And unless there's like a public safety issue that comes up, but
definitely.
Okay, that's all I have. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councilwoman Romero Worth, you have your hand up. Did you?
Yeah, I'm still trying to parse through all this stuff. So did we ever get an answer to why the parks programming should be in parks? We should be in public works, and whether it was possible to move that to recreation, and to ultimately, if we decide, to this new Department of Health and Safety.
Mr. Chair, councilors, yes, it is possible to move the staff responsible for programmatic functions from public works into recreation.
And does that make sense to staff, that that's something that, you know, we don't want public works to do because public works is doing maintenance and operations, and that makes sense for public works, but the programming piece really doesn't belong there?
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'll attempt to address that question. So public works, you know, the way I consider a lot of, especially take for instance, MRC, the majority of their programmatic items are managed through service contracts. Definitely public works is very familiar with managing service contracts. We manage service contracts, we manage contracts with the Rail Yard Corporation, with all kinds of different types of contracts. Granted that is a key component of operating the golf course. That's what operates the course play pretty much. But the extent of staff dealing with that is negotiating the contract, getting it run through committee and approved, and then issuing payments against the contract. That's really the extent of that programmatic piece, which is no different than any of the other contracts that Public Works manages. So other than, in my opinion,
I'm sorry, John, let me just stop you. What contract did you just switch to talking about the golf course?
Yeah, as an example of a program and what's involved in managing that program.
Yeah. Let's not talk about the golf course.
Okay.
I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. What I'm interested in is the line of questioning that Councilor Cassett Sanchez had about the programming of parks.
Okay,
And
I follow.
yeah, let's not, that's, yeah, whoa.
I apologize. Okay. So I understand. So one of the prime things of dealing with programmatic things in parks is managing league play. And it's working
who?
League play.
League play.
So determining what leagues use what fields at what time and how they work with each other. So, you know, we operate similar things like that. At the airport, we manage sharing of a facility between commercial and non-commercial flights. In streets, we manage use of our right-of-way for programming. Outside dining is a good example. People that need to use our right-of-way for construction staging, things like that. We manage coordinating who can use what at what point. In this case, you know, I think I don't think it would be completely detrimental to separate it from parks, but I do think having it with parks would help facilitate day-to-day, if not week-to-week coordination. So that way, these people that are managing league play, that are in direct contact with league managers, they get it directly to us on a daily, weekly basis if there are any issues that come up with the parks. They're basically our liaison between the user to the operator, and we're the operator of the public parks is the operator of the park, meaning making sure the facility is working. So I think there's more of a benefit to keep it with parks than to separate it.
And I can completely understand that, you know, with regard to leagues, because I mean, if you know there's a big league tournament going on, or you know it's the season for a particular league, you know that you're going to have a you know the parks are going to have to be at a particular level in order to accommodate that league play. But I think if you're just looking at how we use parks and program parks outside of the structure of leagues, I can understand how that might be something you would want to keep with recreation. And I don't know, can you split those hairs?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Romero-Worth, I'd like to ask John to clarify this, but I believe the programmatic portion of our parks is primarily run by the leagues that use them. There are the only city leagues that I know of that are run by the city are those that are operated in recreation facilities, not in parks. But I would like clarification from John on that.
And I'd like to hear from John too, because I think, I mean, if we wanted to use our parks in a recreation way that leads to health outcomes or something, that we wouldn't be stepping on anybody's toes, and recreation could still do that, right?
Mr. Chair, Councilor, yeah, definitely. We currently have that coordination. When we manage the triathlon, we're using roads, and we have to manage the sweeping of the roads and all that type of stuff to accommodate a lot of that stuff. So, you know, I understand. So there is the benefit of bringing stuff within a department to have better coordination, but just because things are in separate departments doesn't mean that they're not coordinated.
And, and to that example, the triathlon stuff is in recreation.
Yes.
Yeah. John Munoz, can you clarify the use of parks primarily
Sure,
for league?
There's a lot of Johns on this.
Yeah, I know,
call.
sorry.
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair,
a lot of Romeros too.
Yeah, a lot of Romeros. Yes, that's not my middle name, but yeah, close. So, yes, on the recreational side, We do a lot of significant coordination that includes other activities besides leagues or triathlons, but there is a great deal of coordination, gatekeeping that, we reach out to different departments like Public Works, constituent services, water. So our department touches a lot of departments and a lot of divisions within the city. On the coordination side, so there are other activities that you are very well aware of, such as from small weddings to birthday parties to the egg hunt to other activities that we coordinate with the arts community as well within the park. So there's a significant amount of activities and programs that we do manage and coordinate with other departments, from PD to the fire department, again to organizations like the Arts Commission.
And having the department split the way it's being recommended isn't going to impact that in any detrimental way.
We'll have to coordinate and work that through. As Director Wheeler mentioned, we've been meeting or we've met, and so we're working out some of the details.
Okay. Councilor Cassett Sanchez, does that kind of get at what you were talking about?
I think to an extent that this is something to look at. For me, where I'm really looking at is how are parks assets to our community as opposed to just spaces. And I really see a difference in how those things are addressed, which is why I feel that the programmatic aspect of recreation or the programmatic aspect of park should be in rec, especially for putting rec, if we ultimately move it into this health and safety where, our youth services also lies. And when we really think about parks and that community asset piece, that's really what I'm struggling with is I think that, Public Works is absolutely, there's a lot of ways that maintenance can be improved through that combination. And as we were talking about the different, coordinations that John was mentioning through the streets and the current Parks Department. But when we are looking at this community piece, that's where I'm seeing that recreation and that parks development. And to everybody's point, it's not that because we split them that there wouldn't be coordination. We already see coordination across departments anyhow. So yes, I think that we've spoken to it. I would still argue that the programmatic aspect should be in recreation because it's not just what we currently do, but what do we want our parks to be for our community, and how do we want them to be serving the overall well-being and quality of life of our community. And I think that rec as a mission statement, generally that fits in more than Public Works as a mission statement. And it's not that they're not capable, but it's really what are the missions of these two different departments. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for helping me understand what you're thinking about. All right, let's go back to the golf course. So I think we need I need to see some numbers. So besides just, the tee times generate 593,000, golf carts generate 269,000. I mean, if we were not to have, we have to have a functioning golf course. So if we were not to do this contract, what does this mean for the city? Who's going to do these things that this contract does? And what does that mean financially to us? What's the cost benefit analysis? And then, I don't want to pit the golf course against other things. So I think we need to pull up and look at the bigger forest and be, everything is taking a hit, but it's still functioning at some level. And, as to the money that we found in the budget today, you know, I don't know whether that money, to the overall point is that the money, you know, maybe that money is best spent on housing vouchers. Maybe it's not. Maybe we have other pools that we can, you know, if it's a priority and we don't like the levels at which we're, you know, affecting the housing issues in the community, maybe we, you know, we decide how much more we need to put there, and then we need to look at what our funding options are there. And so I think it's not a pitting of things one against the other, but it's more of a holistic overall, like, let's look more big picture. How are we gonna, you know, figure out the right balance? And, you know, I still haven't gotten the question. I don't think we've received the information about, you know, the lodgers tax and, you know, our arts and culture department versus the convention center and our tourism stuff. Like, how do we know we have the right balance there? And that's the same funding source. So we haven't seen any, I know I asked for it, but I haven't seen any of the information that I asked for in terms of better understanding, you know, maybe the balance is created in law for us and we don't have, and it's state law, so we can't affect that. But again, I don't have enough information to know. So I just want to discourage us from, I don't know, fighting over a little bit of money or pitting, you know, golf interests against housing interests. I mean, I think we need to decide what our overall priorities are and where we're comfortable with, and then we got to figure out, you know, how we go about funding them. So I just, it scares me a little bit that we were going down a path that isn't going to serve us very well as a whole of all the things that we need to be doing. So I feel like we need more information. And that's all I have to say for the moment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Romero Worth. And I think, Ms. McCoy, you've heard the discussion regarding this. This is also an enterprise fund. And so I'm sure there's a way that we can figure out 140,000 when you're dealing with an enterprise fund. There's fees involved. There's revenue that we heard is generated. So if you can continue to work on this, I think that would be helpful. But let me go to Councilwoman Joanne Vigil Koppler and then Councilor Lindell for the last word because we need to move on. Councilwoman Vigil Koppler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to speak about the golf course. I will say that the golf course is one of the things I think that the city does really well. I hear from people all over about who have used the golf course, who are very complimentary, and I know a lot of that has to do with Jennifer Romero and the work she does and the high standards she has for the course. New Mexico Golf Limited is very experienced at running golf courses. And this is not, I don't believe this is something you can just throw some city employees in and have them do it. It's not. Running golf courses is a specialized field. It is more than it sounds like. And I think, you know, when something's running well, if we can help save it, that would be great. There are some organizations that we have around town, like For Kids, who raise funds. I know there are others who raise funds to help children get involved in playing a sport and provide them with the equipment necessary. And I know our golf course, I believe, I can't speak to what kind of discounts that children get, but I think we do foster a spirit of getting kids involved in golf, not just like tennis or swimming and other areas, but the more you have kids busy, the better. It's not just an adult sport, and the more we can do as a city to involve youngsters in this, the better. The other thing I want to say about this is Marty Sanchez Golf Course is known as a destination golf course. We have the Marty Sanchez Golf Course publicized in materials all over the United States. And so it does affect tourism. People have scheduled golf among many courses around the United States, including New Mexico, including a couple of courses in New Mexico. So sometimes they'll play at Las Campanas, they'll come to Marty Sanchez, they'll go over to that golf course in Farmington that's pretty renowned, and then a couple of courses in Albuquerque, and I think one in Las Cruces. So I would hate for us to see that, lose that kind of revenue, because when people come here to play golf, they stay here and they spend money, and it is affecting tourism. The other thing I want to, I don't know if I have this correct, but I believe a lot of our good marketing has been done by the person who works in Marty Sanchez. I've seen some of the materials, and I don't know if I'm right, but I think the proposal is to move that person into constituent services and marketing. I'm not so sure I'm in favor of that, but you know, we're already kind of sparsing out that recreation facility as it is. I think we have more to lose than not by not funding New Mexico Golf to continue to run this course. It's an important facility in New Mexico and certainly in our city. And again, I think we're doing very well with it. So I propose we do what we can to keep it going well, because it's working really well. And another kudo to Jennifer. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councilwoman Lindell.
Thank you, Chair. I didn't get a chance to weigh in on reorganization. I'll make it quick. A couple of thoughts on it. I don't know what is it that we gain in this reorganization? How do we gain in separating Parks and Rec? What is the organizational gain in that reorganization? I don't really know the answer to that. I don't know if anybody has an answer to it, but I think that's something that certainly needs to be addressed when we vote on a reorganization. What do we gain by doing this? We changed this around, I believe, in 2014. That's the last reorg on this. My thoughts on it would be, I need to know what we gain. Secondly, I can see medians and building maintenance going over to Public Works, but to me, it seems like parks themselves and recreation do belong together. And I'm wondering, did we go to staff and ask them for their opinion on it and how they thought it could best work? Because it's a big change for people. I don't know where it needs to be housed, but I also think that for anybody that's been on this council for any amount of time whatsoever, we ask median crews to do more work than is physically possible to get done. We have, I think, over 100 miles of medians that we're asking a crew of 6 to service. It's not possible, friends. We're setting them up for failure. We're setting ourselves up for failure. It's something that the public sees every time they get in their car, and constituents feel like we failed them on this. And it's not, trust me, it is not the fault of our crews. Those crews work astoundingly hard. Can't do it, can't cover them all. I think that, I think John Munoz has brought the people in those departments together in a way that I haven't seen them work together before. They feel heard, they feel listened to, they feel part of a team. And I think that's a big deal, because I think that for a long time, they kind of felt like they were a bit of a stepchild of a different department. Also, certainly Jennifer with the golf course, you know, she stepped up a few years ago, and I've sat on that oversight board for a long time, and things have never worked this well. And I totally agree with Councilor Vigil Koppler. let's not fix that. It's not broken. That thing is running well. It's a pleasure to be out there. I haven't had a chance to do that for a long time, but I hear from people all the time how well it's running. So my concern is in the reorg, what do we gain by doing this? What do we get by splitting this up? And I think in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of gains, and I don't want to erode what we've worked on and put together. So in order to move this on, I know that we have a lot of things that are going to need to come to us to get this reorg. We're not voting on a reorg right now. We're strictly voting on a budget. And I will say that this budget, in terms of people to complete the work that we're asking, it's inadequate, and we're going to have to address it again. But in order to move this on, I will make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'd like to wait till tomorrow.
Is there a need? There might not be a need to meet tomorrow unless we want to meet on just this issue. Do we think we'll get more?
Meet for public utilities, aren't we?
Wait, we still have BDD to do, and we've got a hard stop at 4. There's no way we're going to finish this today.
Okay, we have a motion. I'll second the motion. Because I just don't know how much more information we're gonna get between now and tomorrow regarding public works. I think a lot of the issues have to do with the reorg. I think when it comes to the golf course and the contract specifically, I think that's something that Ms. McCoy and the city manager, along with the 2 directors, can take a look at. Like I said, this is an enterprise fund. I would be surprised if there's not a way we can restore this contract through raising fees, or maybe as part of the reorg, there's vacancy savings that come up. So I just don't know that continuing the discussion on this budget will add anything more.
So Mr. Chair, then point of clarification. So then what you just made a motion to is to approve this budget as it is currently written, which includes a cut for the contract for the golf course.
Yes, because my hope is that we can find, this will become a priority to fund maybe in the first quarter of the fiscal year through either, like I said, the reorg or through raising fees or something.
And we don't think we can have an answer overnight. That's too big a lift.
Ms. McCoy, what are your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, councilors, we can try to find the funding overnight. I really do think we can, working with John Romero, John Munoz, and Director Wheeler, we can manage this over the next few weeks and come back to you with a report on how we can either make a budget adjustment or manage through this.
Okay, but I think I heard 2 things. You said overnight, but then in a few weeks.
I think it'll be, Mr. Chair, I think it'll be really difficult to do overnight. It'll be, again, that with any major change, whether it's a reorganization or with this drastic of a budget reduction, these are the difficult decisions that we're talking about. I think Director Wheeler had raised her hand and wanted to address this topic as well.
Well, hang on. Let me continue
Okay.
to talk with the committee members. Councilwoman Romero Worth, what?
So, I mean, so what I'm hearing is we'll work on how we're going to address the golf course, either between now and potentially at this point, Wednesday. And it may take longer than that. But I mean, I guess the question is, but we have a commitment that we need to have a functioning golf course?
That's kind of the intent.
So we approve the budget, as it is, which is a cut to this contract with an understanding that there's a realization that we have to have a functioning golf course and we need to find the money somehow. Is that, yeah. I mean, if that's the understanding, I think that's probably okay. And again,
Just
I don't want to be pitting interests directly against each other.
Right, but that's why I didn't want to vote like to move the 150 from the clerk.
Exactly, exactly.
Councilor-
Mr. Chair, councilors, at this point, the way I understand the intent of the councilors is this will be one of our top priorities moving forward in the next few weeks to be able to identify either an additional way to fund this, but that this is a key critical service for the functioning of the golf course. In addition, we will avoid pitting this against other key critical, mission critical funding opportunities for other areas in the budget.
Yes, Councilwoman Lindell, as the maker of the motion, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that works for me because it is a critical function, and I know that Chair, our time is limited. Councilor Romero Worth, I appreciate you clarifying on that, the direction that we do need to go. Do you feel that that needs to be part of the motion, Councilor Romero Worth?
Well, I just want to be clear that what we're doing is adopting the budget as it has been presented to us, even though we have raised questions about it. So I think this comment, this back and forth sort of clarifies this, but maybe we need to make it part of the motion.
Would you make it part of the motion, Councilwoman Lindell?
Yes, I would. That we bring forth a proposal to fund the New Mexico Golf profession. New Mexico Golf. What are you saying, Councilor?
I'm sorry. Sorry. I think the motion that you're making is to approve the Public Works budget as it's written. I think the staff has direction as to what needs to happen.
All right,
with the budget.
let's stick with the original motion then.
Okay, then can we have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes. Okay, so the Public Works budget is complete. It is 3:29. So now we're gonna hear from AFSCME, who had sent an email either yesterday, later in the afternoon, or maybe this morning is when I saw it. But I reached out to AFSCME and asked if they wanted another opportunity to address the Finance Committee, and they had agreed that, yeah, they would be willing to do that now at 3:30. So Joe, can you let the AFSCME representatives on so that they can address the committee?
Counselor, they are on.
Okay, so go ahead.
Good afternoon, councilors. Good afternoon, Chairman Abeta. Good afternoon, city staff. My name is Therese Martinez. I am the recording secretary for AFSCME Local 3999, and I was asked to read to you what most of you should have probably received earlier this morning on our position statement as to what we feel about the financial budgeting. So I'm going to read off, I hope that you don't mind. It is lengthy, and I will be just going line by line. AFSCME Local 3999 position statement on financial budgeting. The city government reorganization. We believe that this should be a separate issue unto itself. It is intermingled with the current approval of the city budget for 2020, 2021. Therefore, if the Finance Committee approves the city budget for 2020, 2021, and it goes to council, it is also approving the restructuring of the current city structure. This should not be clumped together. What is the motivation for this new structure right here, right now, in this budget? The mayor spoke of better. What makes this better government? What case studies back this up? We understand the need for health and safety, engagement, and development, especially at this time with the current state of our world. But to make our entire government offices these and lump it together with the current budget makes it a given, not an option. Not even a vote on just that, and an easing into and looking at any other alternatives. Because Albuquerque is doing it is not a good reason. How does this reimagining city government provide better service? The time frame is rushing it, the reorganization, into approval and guaranteeing that it is approved by pairing it into the budget approvals and included in every department's budget. There are too many complications, repercussions, and questions that arise from such a hasty decision. This affects over 1,400 employees, including the counselors on which this decision rests. Please consider requesting an extension to separate the restructure from the current budget. It should not be a given. What is not working in the current city organization that can be rectified without changing the structure and reorganizing? What are the roles and missions of the Community Engagement Department, the Community Development Department, the Community Health and Safety Department? Is the term community being used to give the Santa Fe residents a sense of involvement in the city government? This causes confusion. Which department handles what? This muddies up the waters. The financial budget. Being that the mayor has stated that the finance department team is now presenting a balanced budget, and though we are still in a state of emergency with the current pandemic, we feel there are a lot of question marks on almost everything being proposed since it hinges on the city being restructured. We do not agree that these being fused together and dependent on one another is a fair budget solution. The first and foremost question on our minds is the most prudent. If the hiring freeze, reduction in operating expenses and capital costs, and the use of surplus cash balances from 18 different funds, this is the mayor's statement to the New Mexican, patch up the existing deficit, yet there is an anticipated decrease in revenue resources. Where is all the money coming from for all the new positions and expenditures? We request the breakdown of the savings from the previous hiring freezes, the no longer allowing of comp and overtime savings, the salary pay cut savings, the next series of furloughs that we are currently in until September savings, etc. That equals the list of the actual savings and proposed use of these saved monies. If no further furloughs are projected after September 4th, why aren't the furloughs ending now with a proposed balanced budget? The perceived anticipated savings of the further freezes and not filling of vacant positions, also of the accelerated contract to retirement, the taking of vacant positions, and using that monetary value in other area savings, etc. We want a monetary breakdown. That's what we're requesting to the union. Where is the $1.5 million retirement incentive money coming from for the retirement? Will these new now vacant from retirement positions be frozen or filled? Will it be dependent on the position? The proposed role of Director of Health and Safety, for which the salary is being taken from a retiring Assistant Fire Chief, $106,000 salary, to a proposed salary of $194,000, and this was with benefits. This was Mary McCoy's information. Where is this money coming from? Why is this position necessary? Isn't the city manager already in an overseeing position at the present? Is the city manager being replaced by this position? Doesn't the city already have plenty of managers? Another tier and red tape has been added. This does not appear to simplify but congest the process. How does adding an additional director at a very high salary affect the other 20 division directors that have a 15% salary cut, the department directors? How are they affected? Are the division directors and managers also getting a salary cut of 15%? This is unclear. Again, what are the cost savings for this and where are these monies being directed? If this director is overseeing police, fire, and other community services, what kind of qualifications does this director need? We've heard budgetary, then expert in police, fire, and social work background. What are the qualifications and responsibilities of this position? What is the hierarchy for others beneath this position? Do responsibilities overlap? Is this a redundant position? What will the roles and responsibilities of the mayor and the city manager now be? Where is the new organizational chart for each and every, so that each and every employee is clear where they stand? What are the new chains of command? Who is reporting to whom? This affects not only our membership, but management also. The mayor at the beginning of his term had senior management staff requalify for their positions, and several staff members were let go. Why then is he double teaming his managers now and having them oversee other departments that they are not qualified to oversee, do not have the training? Are the vacant positions and therefore money removed from each department and proposed to be used elsewhere going to be reinstated after the economic status levels off and begins to improve? What happens to those with staff shortages? When does upward movement and promotion happen if everything is frozen? This is proposing stagnation. The monthly updates the mayor is proposing. Is there any possibility of changing terms or conditions of the budget, the vacant positions? Who approves these? The Labor Management Board, that's half union, half city management, or the council? Is it reviewed officially by the Finance Committee and the findings taken to either of the aforementioned boards? The fact that the city manager can, with her signature, approve $200,000 of expenses, $200,000 of expenses, and the mayor is proposing contracts for new hires. What happened to the hiring freeze? The council does not have to approve any of them. The city manager, through the mayor, can do so with the stroke of the pen, correct? Why is there a 1,264% budget increase in the community services budget, $758,600 under contractuals and utilities? It looks like a blank check waiting to be written by whomever labels it as essential, since it appears others can dip into this fund. Who is policing this? Why is this solely on the shoulders of the community services budget? The city manager brought up that this was phase one. What does phase one consist of? What is phase 2, 3, etc.? What are the conditions, elements, details for each phase, and why? Who developed these phases, and how does this affect the budget? How does this affect the employees? A grants division is being proposed. What department is this in? Who will then be hired when there's a hiring freeze and oversees this? Why is this necessary? What will the grant money be used for? Who will have access to the grant money? What is the reason for splitting up Parks and Rec? Where is the parking staff being reassigned to? Are these employees being retrained? What are the cost savings? And how does this affect employees and their job classifications, duties, etc.? The proposed task force led by Councilor Villarreal and Councilor Rivera, what are their duties, responsibilities? Why is this necessary? How does this improve the city or improve expenditures? Can the director, the new hire, mayor, city manager override the task force decisions? Meanwhile, every day, activities of the 3 unions are going by the wayside with a detouring off the course to reorganize, reimagine the city government. The police contract is sitting in limbo, along with its requests, and can't be ratified by their members, even though it's been approved. The 2 paramedic positions, the uniform allowance of $625 per year, and especially the $240,000 that was not being used by their members' PERA contributions that was taken from the firefighters. Will they be getting this back along with their assistant fire chief position at the end of the fiscal year? The negotiations for an entire new contract for AFSCME Local 3999 has been postponed and is set to reconvene August the 1st. Will the city be caught up in the reorganization and all the consequences caused to make time to attend meetings? Do these new community departments affect the classification of employees, reduce the workforce, cause shortages or redundancies, duplicate services? All these will affect the contract negotiations and day-to-day operations. Uniforms, PPE, work boots, etc. This is presently handled department by department. With the new proposed compressed, reorganized departments, how will this be handled should this plan be approved? How are department budgets being handled in the future, going from 12 departments to 3? How do these very different new divisions share a budget when they have entirely different needs and responsibilities, roles, and duties? Or will there still be 12 individual budgets underneath the new proposed departments? How many new positions are being created with the reorganization, social workers, directors, etc., during a hiring freeze? And how are they all being funded? AFSCME Local 3999 represents 51% of approximately 1,400 of the city employees. We feel the reorganization for the current city government is not a viable solution when paired with the 2020-2021 budget. They cannot stand alone. They are dependent on each other and should not be. This will affect our union membership and complicate an already struggling workforce with all that has been thrown at them since March of this year. We strongly request that the reorganization be separated from the proposed budget, then that the reorganization be justified with proper research and data. There are too many question marks in a very rushed attempt to approve a reorganization, not a budget. Respectfully, we are AFSCME Local 3999.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This was well written and thought out, and I really appreciate you reaching out to us and presenting this information to us today. I think it's very important that we hear from you on this. I would encourage fire and police that if they have thoughts also that go into this kind of depth and detail, that they should share that with us. I think it's very important, a lot of the points that you raise, I think it's very important to underscore that the approval of the budget does not constitute approval of the reorg. I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done between now and when the reorganization is finally presented to the governing body. But it is going to be very helpful to have your thoughts on these issues as we have those discussions, not only as a finance committee, but also as a governing body. Thank you once again for taking the time to present.
We did have one last concern that came up just with a little bit of viewing of what was going on today. We heard August was going to be the approval for the reorganization. And we also heard there was something about the proposed savings that were for closed positions that were vacant, that were being moved to other areas. But we're also thinking in the future about the reopening. What with the reopening, what happens with all the proposed savings from being closed? Because again, can the monthly meetings adjust the budget in September? The position savings, all those kinds of things, it would be a whole different picture. And we were really pushing that there be some kind of decision-making in these monthly meetings, that they're just not updates, but that they are actually have some kind of action with it, not just an update as to we got so many more in the GRT or the general funds, that kind of thing, but that there are actual updates that say where these positions are, what's happening to these vacant positions, especially those that are in need of some of those vacant positions being reinstated.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's something that we talked about in the beginning of the budget, this budget process, was that this is something that's going to be different from years past, where, as you know, we approve a budget and then for some of us it goes on a shelf and then we get on to the other business of the city. I think what's going to happen, well, I know with this budget, because of the situation that we're in, that there's going to be adjustments throughout the year. Maybe not, they're not monthly, but I would think they're going to be at least quarterly. And so this is going to be something that gets adjusted and official action taken on by the governing body throughout the year, not just on Wednesday. And then, like I said, like years past, we put it on the shelf and we go back to our business as normal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have 15 minutes. We got a memo from Shannon Jones, the Public Utilities Director, regarding the Public Utilities Department and specifically the questions we had regarding the Buckman direct diversion. So are there questions from the committee regarding the Buckman direct
Chair?
diversion?
Can we postpone this conversation till tomorrow?
Sure. Do you want to make a motion?
I'd like to move that we adjourn if possible and take this up tomorrow. This is, I think, a really important conversation, and I'm concerned about bifurcating it.
Okay, we do have tomorrow reserved at 1 p.m. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any further discussion? Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Carol Romero Worth,
Yes.
Counselor Signe Lindell,
Yes.
Counselor Renee Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Jamie Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
and Counselor Romana Beta.
Yes. So with that, we are adjourned until tomorrow at 1 p.m. where we'll take up the public utilities budget, specifically the Buckman direct diversion. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Councilwoman
Yes.
Villarreal.
there's outstanding questions and things that we want to, and information we're still awaiting. And when are we going to receive that information? Because if we have questions to follow up on that additional information, then I'm trying to understand when we're going to be able to ask those questions.
Ms. McCoy, what are your thoughts? There is some information that's easier to obtain and questions answered, you could answer quicker than others. So what are your thoughts? That's a good question by Councilwoman Villarreal.
Mr. Chair, councilors, as I indicated before and in the email over the weekend, staff is continuing to compile the information in response to councilors' questions throughout last week. That's the difficult thing about doing budget hearings day after day is we're having to work on at night and on the weekend to compile these responses and to make sure that they are complete and we are being responsive to the questions that are asked. Councilor Villarreal did bring up a lodger's tax question, I believe, earlier. We did have an opportunity to get the city attorney's office to weigh in on that this morning. So we expect that information to be coming today as soon as I have an opportunity to review it this evening, as well as the position information that was requested. If there is anything that is outstanding other than what we covered today, please let me know, give me a call, send me an email so we can make sure. Those are the two major items that are outstanding on my list.
Well, there was a few others that myself and other councilors brought up, but at this point, I haven't seen the comprehensive list of things, the outstanding questions and information needed. I think you said, Chair, that you had sent something out, but I haven't seen it. And so I don't know if my questions were on that list or not.
Okay, yeah, I sent Mary a draft list of questions or notes that I had. I'll update it this afternoon. I'll send it to the entire group by hopefully 5 o'clock. And then maybe what we could do after we deal with the BDD, we could, depending how much time we have, we can maybe try to pick off some of those items tomorrow and see what we can get to. And then if we need more to come back to maybe the next finance committee meeting or Wednesday with answers, we can do that, Ms. McCoy.
Mr. Chair, councilors, yes, of course.
Okay, how does that sound, Councilwoman Villarreal?
Well, there's some that are questions that we had that would be contingent on our approval of the budget. So it's not like they can wait next finance committee meeting. Some are very specific to the budget. And so I just want to make sure that we're not doing this. I mean, we have a very large agenda on Wednesday for some reason. I mean, this one is a big bulk of it, a big piece of it, which is important. I wish we would get rid of some of the things that maybe don't need to be heard on the council meeting agenda. And I'm not sure if anyone's looking into that because I think it's pretty unsustainable. We're going to be there all night, considering what we have to hear on and our public hearings. So yeah, I just want to see what's on the list of that.
So on that point, is there any way, or is it too late? Could we start the city business early on Wednesday? Is there enough time to amend the notice to do that so that maybe we start the council meeting earlier rather than 5 o'clock just for this week?
Well, I think they already announced the time. It's already out there at 5, and the resolution I have to change the time for the remainder of this year is going to be heard at that meeting.
Right, but I mean, if we don't, but the public hearings don't start till 7, that wouldn't change.
Counselor Abeyta, members of the committee, we do need to do 72 hours notice unless it's an emergency hearing. So we are beyond that time period at this
Okay,
point.
I knew there was some kind of exception. I didn't realize
Yeah.
it was 2 hours. Okay. Okay, then, okay, then that's what we'll see what we can get done tomorrow. And then, like I said, I'll send my notes this evening. And we'll just have to go from there. And then Miss City Manager, do you have any comments regarding the agenda for Wednesday?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Within the parameters of the hours, if others have suggestions, we've reviewed the agenda a number of times. They're all time sensitive. You'll note the first number in the discussion items are all contracts that have to be approved. So we've gone over it time and time again, trying to look and see if we can do something else. If we needed to postpone the agenda for the 12th is also getting long and tight. So open to suggestions within the parameters the city attorney lays out. We've looked and I have not come up with any good suggestions.
Okay.
Other than we just got to power through.
Okay, any other comments before we adjourn? All right, then we are adjourned. See you tomorrow.